Welcome to the Power of Partnership podcast. I'm Riane Eisler, President of the Center for Partnership Systems. This podcast brings you the voices from the partnership movement, people using partnership practices to build a world that values caring, nature, and shared prosperity. The Power of Partnership podcast is hosted by Cherry Jacobs Pruitt, a health policy and partnership scholar. Today, Cherry interviews Marty Lewis-Hunstiger and Liz Weinfurter on how the media can help us build a world based on partnership. Marty is the developmental and copy editor and editorial board member of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies. She is also editor of the Creative Nursing Journal and an affiliate faculty member of the University of Minnesota School of Nursing. Liz Weinfurter is the liaison librarian in education and research services in the Health Sciences Library at the University of Minnesota and production editor of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies. And now on to today's POP podcast episode.
Welcome, Liz and Marty. I am so excited for our conversation today about partnership in the media. You know, I think that media is really something that many of us completely take for granted in terms of how pervasive it really is in all aspects of our life. And I don't think that often we think about where patterns of domination show up in the media or where opportunities for partnership may show up. Marty, can you kick us off by shedding some light on this?
Well, thanks. My area of expertise is in scholarly publishing, which is like a subset of the media. And so I have some examples that we'll talk about of how domination is demonstrated there in scholarly publishing. I just gave a presentation recently at the International Academy of Nursing Editors. It's our nursing editing professional organization. My co-presenter was Stephanie Gingrich, who is a member of the faculty of the University of Minnesota School of Nursing and is also on our editorial board of our journal. We published an article in the IJPS a year ago in the fall from Cuba, and it was about gender stereotypes and gender acculturation, how children are acculturated into gender very early through schools, family, and the media. Gender issues in Cuba are being discussed. Some are saying that machismo is actually a public health issue because of its relationship to family violence. So we committed to publishing this article, which was originally submitted in Spanish. We published it in both languages, equally peer-reviewed, equally copy-edited, rigorously in both languages. And we can do that because we have the resources for it. Many journals don't have those resources. But one of the reasons Stephanie was so passionate about it is that she was born and was a small child in Panama. And her mother's family is healthcare professionals who've published scholarly medical literature. When she came to the United States, started grad school, her first course in statistics and literature, the professor said, just ignore all of the sources that are not in English. And she said, that means all the things that my uncle and my aunt and my, this person is saying they are worthless, and they are not worthless. But one of the details in producing that article is the fact that English, we have our pronouns are gendered. That's why we ask people. That's why I have pronouns in here on this Zoom. Our pronouns are gendered, and certain words that describe roles or jobs are gendered, like firemen, policemen, postmen, stuff like that. But mostly English is not gendered. In Spanish, of all the different versions, Spanish is a highly gendered language. Not only the pronouns, but every noun has gender. And so when we were translating back and forth between English and Spanish, the more feminists among us for the English version wanted to, whenever we said girls and boys or boys and girls, they wanted to always list girls first. And in the Spanish culture, you would always list boys first. So the question is, are we going to put our feminism forward and say, no, we're going to say girls and boys every time in both the English and the Spanish versions? Or are we going to acquiesce to the Spanish culture and put boys and girls every time in both languages? As it turned out, just because the way the article came together, sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other. And we didn't intentionally do it that way. No, sometimes people do that, and you can tell, you can spot it right away when people are trying to manipulate it to be equal. But what we didn't do was say, no, we're not going to have boys first, because there may be many people of goodwill who are of Spanish speaking heritage who are so used to having the boys come first. And if we change that in the process of wanting to get this larger message out and alienate them or make them feel unwelcome, we haven't achieved anything. We are better off having them read this article in a way that they feel comfortable reading and be more open to considering what else we have to say. So that's a real specific example about the copy editing process of this article, but we as editors deal with this question all the time. How far should and can we go in advocacy in our language and our word choices and the ideas we present? How far can we go and still include the people that we really want to hear us? Liz, how about you?
Thanks again for inviting me. This is really wonderful to be involved with. So like Marty, my sort of sub niche is within academic scholarly publishing. So specifically within health sciences. So as part of the university libraries at the University of Minnesota, we have made an institutional commitment to helping to foster open access publishing, which is something that we'll talk about later. But I think it's really interesting being in the academy and just seeing the inherent structural domination, even in an educational institution that is trying to push these boundaries. So I think in terms of the things that are published in scholarly journals, there's a lot of just fewer voices of different genders or different ways of knowing. But really that's the final symptom of the problem. And what the reason for this is the historical structures of academic just the domination involved in a system that certain people were allowed into it and certain criteria need to be met. And so that is something that really is reflected in the historical minimizing of voices that were not the traditional white mold. And a lot of work is being done to sort of deconstruct that. But it's really interesting for me to see that as a librarian and kind of in the role of libraries in the center of this, and to think about how are we making sure that other voices are heard. And that's something with partnership that when you're really doing the work, it's hard work, and needing that cultural humility when you're dealing with other cultures and figuring out like what is the balance between what we're creating as a scholarly publisher and what we want to, the standards we want to have or the way that we want to go through, and what happens when that is directly conflicting with a culture that we're partnering with. And so I think that that's where the ability to really examine our hidden biases is really important. And I think that that's really where the transformation happens, is when we are willing to challenge our paradigms and look at it and say, yeah, we are kind of operating with a domination paradigm here that kind of slipped in insidiously, and make the changes where we can.
So, Liz, as a librarian at an academic level, do you experience some of the same challenges that librarians at local school district levels are currently and increasingly experiencing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's kind of, let me pull it apart into two pieces. So I think that the underlying systemic problem of that, again, it's a system. It's like, structural racism. It's built into the way that our world has existed. And so the long-term problem in terms of being able to, access and even being aware, like it confronting our own internal invisible biases about certain types of materials. So academic libraries face this as much as any other type of library in terms of needing to really look at the way we collect things and think about what can we get to illustrate a larger array of voices, and how are those materials available. But I think that the thing that has always been a problem but is especially scary now is the external pressures to minimize voices or to not provide materials on sorts of things. And at our particular university, we're at the University of Minnesota, and are lucky that right now our climate within Minnesota is not like it is within other states at this time. But like North Dakota, right next to us, and a completely different story in terms of pressures on K-12 libraries that are extending out to potentially be affecting, academic universities, research universities, which feels almost unthinkable, but is happening. Look at higher education of Florida, all education of Florida. So I think that we're all dealing with the sort of invisible structural pieces. And I think that's one of the more insidious things, because without work as organizations, as institutions, and personally, you don't even realize that you have these things. It's almost easier to sort of unite against external forces.
So let's talk a bit more in detail about the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies. So the journal is an open access journal whose mission is to share scholarship and create connections for cultural transformation to build a world in which all relationships, institutions, policies, and organizations are based on principles of partnership. Liz, can you share a bit about how the journal got started with our listeners and what an open access journal even is?
So IGPS's story started, 11 or 12 years ago. So Teddy Potter, who was one of our founding members, came to me in my role as the librarian liaison to the School of Nursing at the University of Minnesota with an idea. She said that there isn't a place that exists right now for the scholarship related to partnership and to Riane Eisler's theories. And so I think what we need to do is create a place for that. And we were aware that in terms of wanting to give this new field the legitimacy that it deserved in order to advance our ultimate goals of transforming things, we needed to have be thoughtful about the way that we disseminated the information with an eye toward how do people perceive authority or perceive something being high quality. So that's usually the answer to that in academic worlds is a scholarly journal. So IGPS really pushed the university libraries to commit to forming and hosting and supporting an institutional publishing platform, open access publishing platform, so that people affiliated with the University of Minnesota can create their journals here. And we are making the commitment to host it, and again, to give it that sort of mark of traditional authority, which is, okay, this is coming from a research university, it's coming to the libraries. Those are typically flags that something has quality and whatever. So really being able to leverage our privilege with that to advance something. And so what that did by the libraries providing that sort of in-kind support was take out the the need for authors, for us to need to like get authors to pay a charge in order to make this open access. So that's really where it was born. So that's what's called gold open access, where you are able to, there's no charge to publish and there's no charge to read it. And we were the first journal, and now there's many journals and open textbooks and different types of things on this platform. But IGPS really was the one that kind of pushed it forward and started it all, which is pretty cool. It's that one little flap of a butterfly's wing that we can do.
You are listening to the Power of Partnership podcast. If you would like us to share your partnership story, or if you would like to become a proud sponsor of the POP podcast, please contact us at center@partnershipway.org. And now, back to today's episode. Can you give us a taste of what listeners can find when they open the link to the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies?
I think another really unique thing about our journal when we were kind of envisioning what it was going to be is that we really did want to provide different ways of knowing. So our journal, when you click on the link, it's all online. And the first thing you'll notice is an artwork. So that was something that we committed to, is that in every issue, we have cover art that is linked to the principles of partnership, and an artist statement is included. And we've had different things from more kind of traditional, like paintings or drawings. We've had videos, different types of media, different types of artistic expression. And that's really what you see at first. And that was really important to us, to keep that connection to things beyond your more dry scholarly stuff. But then we do have these multiple sections. So we have our kind of traditional, like academic, scholarly type articles that we, again, very carefully made sure aligned with the accepted norms around traditional scholarship, so that we could make sure we were able to connect to people who are still in that world and still need that sort of, those sort of attributes. But we also have a section of articles that we call community voices. And the idea with that was to be able to provide access to people outside of academic environments. So our partners' communities that are seeing these sort of partnership things in action, and a space for them to be able to write about this. And so we have that. We also will have a conversation with somebody. So Riane will usually find somebody that is a person that could talk about this, and we have sort of an interview format for that. We have media reviews. So unlike most scholarly journals, it is a mix of different types of information that are accessible to different types of authors. And that right there is already a small thing that allows us to sort of really break the mold of that very kind of gatekeeping scholarly construct.
So I'm going to start this next question with you, Marty, but Liz, I'd love to hear if you have anything you'd like to add. What do people who care about the media we consume, including people who are involved in producing it, need to know about the domination partnership continuum?
When it comes to media, producing and consuming media, domination is kind of easier to understand and envision than partnership is, because we're kind of bathed in this domination system right now with these still small voices of partnership. So to look for domination with every message, what you need to do is ask, what is the basis for this statement? The way I manage that is I say, and you're basing that on, and their answer tells me a lot about how much more energy to expend on even talking to this person. Does it purport to be based on science? But is it really based on junk science? Is it based on surveys and opinions? If you don't already know this, you can get any answer you want out of a survey, depending on the questions that you ask. So survey results are not a really good basis for any kind of information for all of me. Then the next question you should ask is, what voices are missing? Who are we not even hearing from at all? This is what we heard, and that's fine. But who are we not hearing from? What voices are absent? And also encouraging publishing in multiple languages, as I described.
Liz, any thoughts that you'd like to share in terms of what do people who are consuming or producing the media need to know about the domination, partnership, social scale, social lens?
Marty really summed it up very well, and just a few things that I could add to it. So I think that for those of us who are really involved and deeply into the work of really looking at our structural biases, it can become very paralyzing, and you can end up in a loop. But in the end, what we need to do is see how can we sort of advance it forward. So having, I think, a good parallel is the idea of evidence-based practice. And you can see how this has really spiraled out of control, I would say, over the past, 5 years, in terms of, people being able to find anything and say, okay, well, this is a study, this is my evidence, I did my own research, this just means that, and everybody's a public health expert and everyone's an expert, everyone did their research by doing internet searches to find things that met what they wanted to say. And so what are the things about that? Open access to information is great. Like, as an idea, that's wonderful. And, needing to have this sort of third thing that we haven't talked about too much that librarians think a lot about is that education about critical appraisal and the ability to look at something and to think about those things that Marty was saying, like to go through the list of, okay, this as a thing is neutral. Like, what are the strengths of it? What are the weaknesses based on what I want to do with it? Am I aware of the domination factors that might be affecting it? How does that affect what I want to do with it? And it's hard. It's really, really, really messy. And our role is trying to carve out that little niche of something that we can make a little bit cleaner with transparent standards and with a real commitment and work toward moving toward the principle of partnership while still maintaining something that is high quality based on the standards that we put out.
Marty and Liz, thank you so much for giving us all so much to reflect on as we engage with media throughout our lives. I wonder if you both have any final words that you would like to share with our listeners today in terms of moving forward in creating the world which the Journal and the Power of Partnership podcast envisions, where all relationships, institutions, policies, and organizations are truly based on the principles of partnership.
For me, both partnership and domination find their strength in individual choices and in personal responsibility. How do we treat each other? That was the basis of Riane's lifetime study as a Holocaust survivor, studying why would people do that to each other. So for me, personal responsibility is a big thing, and I'm going to link it to FOMO, which is a thing that I'm learning about. Fear of missing out. You hear about this all the time. And I don't relate to it much myself because I've got so much going on that I never feel FOMO at all. But in a domination environment, what people pay attention to, all these messages that are coming at them, they tend to pay attention to them all equally out of fear of missing something that either could threaten their safety or even their lives, or for fear of being marginalized if they aren't, in with what's going on. So that's what FOMO is like in a domination environment. But in a partnership environment, what we need to not want to miss out on are the opportunities that are all around us to learn more good stuff. We don't want to miss out on any chances to marvel at the amazing diversity of people in the world. And we want to give power to the voices that often aren't heard.
Lovely. Thank you. How about you, Liz?
I think that my kind of final thoughts of this that have been illustrated by a lot of the examples is that the core of what we want to do, the vision is really pure, open and partnering, and that's just incredible. And then like the reality of just what we're dealing with trying to make these things happen in a system that is built for domination, where the structure is meant for domination. And so I think that where I always kind of come back to is it's important to be able to see the big picture and see the vision, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, be able to do the things that we can. And so in this great big world of that gets really overwhelming, and it can get really demoralized in terms of just the structures and the things that are so embedded. But what can we do with our little slice of it? And so I think that being able to say, okay, I can present an open access journal, and we can make this small slice based on the principles of partnership. And also, I think that really being able to sit with the complexity that if you're doing it right, that it's hard work. It's not clean. It's not, there's always going to be practical things, but still keeping your eye on doing the next right thing. That's from Frozen 2, which my children watch all the time. So all we can do is the next right thing, and always be checking ourselves, because the domination is built into us, and we want to be able to challenge it wherever we can. So do all the good you can with what you have, and be committed to the big picture of partnership, and not demoralized by the fact that we can't solve it all with a magic wand. We wish we could.
Thank you so much again, Liz and Marty. It's really been a pleasure speaking to you about partnership in the media. For our listeners, before we close, I want to make sure you know that there will be a link to the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies in the show notes for today's episode, as well as a link to the Center for Partnership Systems website, where you can access additional learnings and courses related to Riane Eisler's cultural transformation theory, the domination partnership, social lens, and the 4 cornerstones of all societies of child and family relations, gender, economics, and of course, narratives and stories. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Power of Partnership podcast. We're grateful to Rising Appalachia for the use of resilience as our Power of Partnership theme music. If you would like us to feature your partnership story, or if you would like to be a proud sponsor of the Power of Partnership podcast, please contact us at center@partnershipway.org. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will leave us a review on your favorite podcast channel. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released every other Tuesday. I'm Cherry Jacobs-Pruitt. See you next time on the Power of Partnership podcast.
I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos. Uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to live.